You know, it actually wasn't. There were other things, but it wasn't anything that attracted your average female. And whereas computing before had been something that maybe was done, you know, didn't know much about it because it was done like behind closed doors by scientists, and it was like a challenge, a bit like mathematics doing the programming. And it came out into and the other thing was there wasn't much to do with these things. How were they going to sell the computers? And that's when the Toys for the Boys came out, because every advert for the personal computers in those days was targeted at men to buy them for their sons. And the other thing that we did, and this was all done with the best of intentions, and I say this story now because we are potentially going to repeat history, and so I'll tell you this story now. The government had this big campaign to put a computer in every school, all right? So this is like putting one telephone in every office, or as Seymour Papert used to say, it's like just imagine if you put a pencil in a class for a day a week. You know, exactly how is that going to influence the education experience of those kids? And so the government had a campaign to put a computer in every secondary school, I think. And they also then set up this, we need to have centres of excellence. I forget what the programme was called, but there was a programme where they took teachers who knew something about computing out of the classroom and put them in centres to potentially help other teachers to learn about how to teach computing. But of course that took all the teachers that knew what they were doing out of the classroom. So who did the teaching? The boys, who taught themselves or learnt from their fathers or whatever. And suddenly you get the phenomenon of the boys at the front trying to get onto the one computer and show off that they could do it, and the girls going, I'd rather do something else with my life. And this happened in Europe, and I believe in some ways this is why there's a north-south divide in Europe, because I think it happened in northern Europe more than southern Europe, and it happened in America. And I honestly don't think this set up a cultural difference, a cultural thing about this computing is for boys that we really have not ever got over. We have not actually changed that. And the reason why I say this, and I'm dwelling on it without telling you about all the lovely stuff I'm doing now, which I'm going to get to, is because the government has, quite rightly in my terms, changed the curriculum in this country to go back to, we're going to put programming at the heart, computer programming. We're going to get all the kids to learn how to program. It's so important we don't repeat history. We have to make those classes inclusive, particularly in secondary schools, because in primary school the activities tend to be inclusive. But we really need to make sure that the way we introduce the new curriculum is done in an inclusive way, or we will just repeat the mistakes of past years. So I went off to Ann Arbor and said, I'm back on me now. But that's my theory anyway. That's my theory of why the West has this serious problem. Because when you go out to other countries, it's not the same, and I'll come back to that later. So I did my sabbatical, and I went off. This is when I gave my first paper at a conference. This is the European Conference on Hypertext in 1990. In Paris. That was the conference I first met one Tim Berners-Lee talking about something he hadn't called the World Wide Web. In Christmas 1990 was when he put the first website up. That he and Robert called it the World Wide Web. And the ACM Hypertext 91 in San Antonio, Texas, was the conference that famously rejected Tim and Robert's paper on the World Wide Web. Right? Not a great paper. There wasn't a lot of research in it. So it was rejected by the reviewers, but a really great idea. And that was they also rejected our second paper on microcosm. And so what do you do when you have paper rejected? You put in a poster or a demo. That's what academics do, students do. And so Tim and Robert submitted a demo of the World Wide Web, and my team submitted a demo of microcosm. We all trolled out to San Antonio, Texas. The demo slot, there is a picture on the web of Tim demoing the web, and I remember looking over his shoulder and watching him demo the web. And of course there was no internet connection, so he paid a bit for a modem, I think, but mostly he was showing a simulation of what it would be like. And that's when I first thought, one-way links and embedded in documents, this is never going to go anywhere, right? It's the network, stupid. But the other thing I remember is because it was Texas, there was a tequila fountain in the reception outside, and they were all out there drinking margaritas, and not many of us, nobody really realised that they were seeing the first, I think it was the first demo of the web in the US, or close to anyway. So we were developing microcosm. I got my first startup company experience in '94. We developed a company to sell our hypermedia system the year that the web started to take off. How clever is that? So people were saying, well, what you're doing is really fascinating, and I think it could be very interesting, but this web stuff is free. So we'll try that first. We actually made I didn't personally make a lot of money. The company did very well. We had £13 million worth of investment. And it's still going as a company. It's called Active Navigation, but it still uses our link data service, but it didn't try and compete with the web. It worked with it and developed into a different type of company, a bit of a niche company. I became a professor, the first professor in engineering at Southampton. I remember the first meeting I walked into, the first committee meeting, and I walked in. It was all men. There was one of the aeronautics professor chairing the session. He said, "Way up, lads, there's a woman in the room now. We have to be careful what we say." And you think, well, what are you going to do? If I'm not here, you're going to tell dirty jokes? What are you going to do? Anyway, yeah, you sort of learn to get through that. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm going to tell you in a minute about the work I do, but this is the career piece. So the luckiest break I got was getting an EPSLC, that's our Research Council research fellowship, and that was 6 years of really not doing a lot of teaching, all research, and that's when I took the ideas of microcosm, started working with Tim on the web, and helped with Tony Hay, grew the department at Southampton, because it was tiny when we were first joined, and Nigel Shadbolt, who many of you will know here, and Nick Jennings, came to Southampton in 2000, and I had that fellowship where I was able to grow my research and grow the reputation of Southampton and grow the team. And also another lucky break, I became a member of an EPSLC council, the member of the EPSLC council. That's what got me my CBE. And you don't know these things when you start out. I was just so excited to be on the council. I took over as the chair of BCS Publications and didn't learn how to say no. So I became vice president of BCS Publications, and then I became, because of that, on the ACM Publications board, never realising I was going to become president of both those organisations. Why did I do that? Serial president, but because I love organising things and people. Got my CBE, and then did my management stint as head of ECS. And this is the last bit of and then I'm going to go into what my research now. But there's the wonderful Sue Black. I was always working to try and help. I've always been part of women's networks, and while I was president, BCS Women became a specialist group. Well, maybe it was the year before I became president, but I helped push it through the board, and we set up the BCS Women's Forum, the work of which is now being carried on in another way, but it's still being carried on in the BCS. I became a member of the Prime Minister's Council, Royal Academy. All these things began to win awards. So what I'm really saying there is that's my career, and here's the web. I can talk for hours about, how long have I got?
Another half hour?
Yeah, well, I can talk for about hours about this graph. It tells, one of my PhD students did it a few years ago, and he updates it every year for me, and he just put on, let's put the growth the pattern of growth and some of the stories. Most people don't realise that Google didn't emerge until 10 years, nearly 10 years after Tim put the first website up. You just think Google's always been there. But this is you don't know what you want until you've built it, right? We had to build the web before we knew how to develop the tools to actually make it usable, right? We couldn't, because you can't do that experiment the way we'd done previously with computing, where you do the design and build and test and go around that cycle iteratively with a few people or a few groups of people. The web works because millions of people use it over the network. And also because another big reason is Tim gave it away. And that, people think Tim's as rich as Croesus, and He's never made a penny out of, well, he does a few appearances nowadays, but basically he gave the web away and he's never signed up to any one vendor or company, because his thesis was, and it's an experiment we can't actually repeat because we've built a web now and it's hard to know, I mean, maybe if this web dies we'll have to build another one. There's a scenario there, but basically his thesis was either everybody uses it or nobody will. All right, we had great difficulty getting people to develop our hypertext. We used to pay people to develop hypertext. John's nodding at the back there. It was really hard to get people to put links into between documents because you didn't know what to link to what. And the web works because you get a return on investment of what you put into it. You can potentially, if you write something or you link to another site, the whole world can read what you've written or follow your link. And of course, Google follows our links. That's why Google works. But it's because, you get that potential return on investment. Facebook works because potentially anybody in the world, if you want them to be, can be your friend. And this is Twitter works because potentially you could microblog to the whole world. And you get that return back if you put, it's what you put in, like in everything else. But because of that, the way it started like that, you see that you've got, if it's free, then you get more of a chance of people starting to use it because they think, well, I'll have a go at this. It's still incredibly slow. Last week, had the great privilege of being given, I won't go into the story, I could tell you stories forever, but somebody gave me the document for me to be the custodian of that was signed in Brussels 20 years ago next month, June 1994, the agreement between Europe and America to set W3C up to run the standards for the web. I've got that document. And this is what took Tim from Europe. Europe lost the web at that point because the Americans had the money to pay for a chair for Tim at MIT. And there's whole stories in that around innovation. But the story I'm going to tell you is in that document, I was reading it because I think, wow, this is really a piece of history and it's in my hands. And we're famous for our fires at Southampton. So I think, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? But it says the justification for why this is so important is ways of getting access to files on the internet sites, Gopher and Waste and so on, and there's this new thing called the World Wide Web. And last year there were 60 sites, and this year, 1994, there are 800 sites. Isn't that amazing? So that's here, you see. It still looks like a flat line. And it's all about the more people, getting people. And every time if you start something, and because of the way it works, that's now the business model for the web. So if you want to get something going on the web, if it's of the web, you have to give it away, get people to use it, and then think about how you're going to keep it going, be it a company or a not-for-profit or whatever, into how you're going to get the money to do that. Are you going to charge people? Are you going to do advertising? You're going to get sponsored. How are you going to do it? And it's a very, very different business model to the ones we've had previously. There's lots of stories in that. But the other thing, so think about the .com bubble here. Oh, there's the navigator, the browser wars, of course. And then, Amazon, and we get streaming media. That's when I got excited. Video on the web. Wow. I still can't do with video on the web what we used to do with the laser video discs. I still can't really do it. But that's another, because you used to be able to, with the laser video disc, you could point on a particular point of the disc and say, what's this? It's really hard to do on the web. There's now software out there that does it, but it's, anyway. So Amazon starts, and people start piling in. They say, "Oh, right, we're going to shopping on the internet, and right, we all want to be as rich as Bill Gates. So let's invest in this company." And there've been lots of .com booms since, where people think this is the new idea. Let's put money and completely overvalue the price of the company, and inevitably it was going to burst. And if you look here, See, when you think about how you got onto the web in these days, there was no Wi-Fi or broadband in our homes. It was all right if you were in a research lab or a big company, but of course companies didn't let people use the web inside the firewall in those days. But we didn't, so there was no reason, or why would you buy, if your computer at home, you had to use a modem and it would go whir, and if you wanted to download a web page, it would go boom, 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 clunk, and then time out, and it was just, we used to call it the World Wide Wait. And so you're actually trying to sell into a market that doesn't exist if you're trying to be a shop on the web. And so it's a bit like after the invention of the printing press, trying to sell books to a society that couldn't read. That was a pretty hard business ask as well. It's the same, only this is all happening a lot faster. And so, again, this is the sort of web science piece. This is if you look back at why things happened, you weren't going to get shopping on the web until you could have fast access, pictures, catalogues. You couldn't do any of that before the technology arrived. You needed a Google as well to find things. And so it was inevitable this was going to burst. But I remember reading one of the broadsheets at the time in the US, I can't remember which one, and there was a very sanctimonious reporter saying, well, that's the end of shopping on the internet. We have now categorically proved nobody wants to shop on the internet. Well, of course, they're completely wrong. Nobody wanted to shop on the internet in 1999, but in 2014, we've got a situation which we were always going to have, where we've got a problem with the high street, everyone's shopping on the internet, the whole of the retail world is being turned upside down, and very exciting it is too. But this is the problem, well, no, not the problem. I think the way we need to be able to look forward is to look back and see what's happened in the past and think about, you've got to take the whole context into account. So, yeah, we've got lots of people using lots of sites. We've got a Facebook and we've got a Twitter. And I need to move on or we'll be here all night. And I need a drink, I'm sure you do too. So, have we got drinks afterwards? Yes. Oh, good, right. So, I'm the one singing for my supper. But anyway, so we're now into the world, the world of social networks. And again, I can tell you loads of stories. And I was talking earlier to someone about why did MySpace die and Facebook grow? And there's lots of stories around that. And we set our students challenges to look at these and all the things that, these things emerge as things that techies write. Here's a way to do your blog. Here's a wiki. It's going to Wikipedia. Put your videos here. Put your photos here. Then we all start doing it. Isn't that amazing? And then, of course, who buys them? The big companies. So then it all goes, a bit different. Interesting stories. This is where I live in Hampshire. There's a lot of people in Hampshire. In fact, my husband was chair of the parish council and they voted not to have a website because they thought it was a waste of public money. That was last year. That's the sort of village I live in. But somebody's put us on Wikipedia. Of course, we're in the Doomsday Book, We're a little village that was in the Doomsday Book, and somebody's put us on Wikipedia. But isn't it amazing that this I want to tell you a secret, really. Well, I won't. No, I'm not going to tell you that secret. But I'm going to tell you that I was doing a bit of research recently, and they estimate, it says it in Wikipedia, so it must be true. Sort of joke. If you printed Wikipedia out, it would be nearly, they put the count up every so often, it would be nearly 2,000 volumes of, if you measure in Encyclopedia Britannica type volumes, it would be about 2,000 of those. So imagine those lined up and imagine following those links. Imagine being in the first one and saying, right, now you go to volume 1563, page number so-and-so, and that's the end of that link. I remember doing lectures about hypertext and trying to explain to people what hypertext was when you only had paper. Quite interesting, that sort of thing. And the last version of the Encyclopedia Britannica that was printed was 32 volumes. Now, we've written all that, and that's just the English language version. We've written all that, we the people. And it's developed its own governance rules. It's fascinating. And there's long, who knows? This is a not-for-profit. They try and raise. They ask you to give money. Who knows what the future is? But but what has certainly happened is we don't have any printed Encyclopaedia Britannicas anymore. You get them, and they're still produced and lovingly edited, but they're not printed. So when the power goes out, which it will, because we don't have enough of it, it's not just the lights and the heating that goes, it's this. And you won't have a book on, even if you've got a torch or a candle to look at it, you won't have a book on your shelf that will give you that information. And all the other things like the travel timetables and the phone numbers you need to call British Airways to find out if your flight is going that night, despite the fact there's no power in the country, and all that sort of stuff. All that information is now in our mobile phones or online.